how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. What we have today is a wildcard video going into game week 15, and it's going to be a bit of a different one because there's only 2 weeks left before the World Cup, so you really need to start. If you're saving your wildcard, there's not much reason to save it unless you're planning a sort of free hit style um, wildcard in game week 16. But really, you should be targeting the fixtures to get more out of your wildcard. It's not like a free hit; it's something that you can, you know, extend in for a couple of weeks at least. So hopefully, this video will help you out. If you are new to the channel, any likes and subscribes greatly appreciated. Had a couple of new subscribers after last week's videos, so that is fantastic. And let's get into it. So we've got teams to target. So we're only targeting fixtures up to the World Cup because at the World Cup you can have another wild card to make unlimited transfers as much as you want. The first team we're going to target is Everton, and they are actually in some good form, especially defensively. People are saying they should be conceding more goals than they are, but they only have to keep, with these teams, they only have to keep the form up for 2 more games. So if they are in good form and they've got good fixtures, they can almost get away with ignoring the data a little bit because data will tend to even out and become more accurate over a period of time, whereas we don't have that much time. We only have 2 fixtures, so could they keep the momentum going? Absolutely. Next team we've got is obviously Man City. 2 home games. You think you would get Man City players in no matter what, but having 2 games at home against teams that you would expect them to beat, even though they're doing well this season, I think it's an absolute must to get Man City players in. And you just go for the obvious ones as well. There's no need to second guess yourself. We've got West Ham coming in third. Again, 2 home games, bit of a trend. Uh, West Ham have had some difficult fixtures recently, but I do think they are playing very well and they're not conceding lots of goals and they are getting chances in attack. They just need to try and start finishing them off. Fourth, we've got Man United, and even though they've got 2 away games, I do think that they are good games. You don't really know what you're getting with Villa. They win 4-0 one week, they lose 4-0 the next week, and I think there's some Man United attackers and defenders that you can get on the cheap that are really good value. And same for Fulham. You think Man United would give Fulham a good match, really, especially since they're turning the form around this time of the season. And then finally, we've got Brighton. Away game first, although it is against Wolves, so I do think they're coming off that Chelsea performance. I do think that Chelsea game is a bit of an anomaly because the players would have been that extra bit fired up. So I don't necessarily think they can keep that form going as good as it was. But you never know because there's only 2 games to go, so they might just ride that wave for the next 2 weeks and then reset in the World Cup. And then the final game they've got is Aston Villa at home. Again, just like Man United, I think when they play Aston Villa, it could go either way. Definitely worth a shout. Some cheap Brighton defenders, especially. So on to teams to avoid, and we're going to start with Fulham. Now, Mitrovic is 1 yellow card away from a suspension, and I do always feel like with these players that are 1 yellow card away, yeah, you've got to keep it into account, but they could be 1 yellow card away for the rest of the season. So until they actually get suspended, you've almost got to play it as if they're on 1 or 2 yellow cards, if that makes sense. For me, it's the fixtures. I think Man City away and Man United at home, there should just be better options. You definitely wouldn't target the defence, and in attack, I do think they're going to find it tough to score in the next couple of games. If you did want somebody in, someone like Mitrovic, like we say, that is on penalties, would be the obvious shout. Next up, we've got Chelsea. Now, whilst they've done okay up until this game week, they've got 2 tough fixtures. And whilst they could still win those fixtures, you wouldn't necessarily see them winning them by a lot or keeping clean sheets, especially after the Brighton game. So I do think they are a bit of a team to avoid. You don't know quite what you're going to get with them at the moment. Up next, we've got Wolves. Now, although they've got 2 home games, just like Chelsea, they're not the easiest home games to have. You would definitely fancy Arsenal to beat them, even though Wolves are playing at home. And that Brighton team, like we said, you don't know what's going to turn up from them. So until they get their form sorted a bit more consistently, I would say to avoid any Wolves players. Fourth, we've got Southampton. They're not on great form anyway. I knew they had a draw with Arsenal a couple of weeks ago, but those fixtures aren't good. Even though you don't really know what you're getting with Liverpool, I do think it's a team you just need to avoid for your wildcard. And then finally, we do have Liverpool. You know, we keep convincing ourselves that they're good fantasy league players, and over time they probably will turn it around. But until that happens, you're kind of just losing points in your team, especially because the players are more expensive. they're taking up a lot of your transfer budget. So there's no need to get them in, especially for these next two games. I think if you were going to, wildcard in game week 16, or you were looking to make a transfer, I do maybe think that you could get them in for the Southampton game at home, absolutely. But you would have said that against Nottingham Forest and Leeds as well. So it's so hard to predict how they're going to do. I just would stay away unless you have nothing else to do with your team. So onto our wildcard team for this game week, and we'll just get the team up there to start with. And whilst they weren't on my teams to target, I have gone for triple Newcastle here. They have Southampton away and Chelsea at home. And whilst the fixtures maybe not mean you should target the team, I do think that they are in form. And if they only have to sustain it for two games, you just ride that wave until they haven't. We've got Trippier, Almiron, and Wilson here. I think Callum Wilson is someone that is trying to get that World Cup place. Almiron is someone that I think won't be able to sustain it over a long period of time, but he is probably a streaky player, a bit like Wilson, who is, you think, well, they score in bunches. So if they're scoring right now and you've got the opportunity to bring them in. And then Trippier is that constant threat for Newcastle as well. He's what's making them tick. And, he should be playing himself into a World Cup squad. We also have Fabianski and Zuma in defence. I don't mind the West Ham double up. The fixtures they've got are quite good. And I do think that defensively they're looking solid up till now. Just conceded only one goal to Man United last game week. And I've gone for Skamaka up front. Palace and Leicester, the next two fixtures. For me, you've got him lining up alongside someone like Mitrovic. Mitrovic has poor fixtures. And Ivan Toney's gone and got himself suspended against, he'll miss the Nottingham Forest game. And then he's got a tough game week 16 matchup. So Skamaka is playing for West Ham and he's starting. So I do think he's somebody that's maybe a good differential pick that you could get in your team as just, hey, you know what? There's 2 weeks to go before the World Cup. Let's get him in and see how he does. Triple Man City as well, big on the triple ups, but then you can afford to be if you're targeting the fixtures. Cancelo, De Bruyne, and Haaland all certain to start. There's no fixture risk of rotation, and I think they're just the obvious players that you get into your team. Saka might be injured, but he's easy to swap for someone like Martinelli. And Rashford has just scored the winner for Man United yesterday. So I do think that he is someone that is, pushing for that World Cup space. The bench is all cheap. You could rotate them. It's up to your preference on the fixtures and how you want to do it. But I do think there is no point having expensive players on your bench if you know your team are going to start. There is rotation risk at the moment because players are thinking of not, getting injured for the World Cup and resting. But I think to have a lot of money on your bench for only 2 weeks is a waste. I think you'd have a bit more of an expensive bench if you were planning on wildcarding for, not making any changes for 6, 7, 8 game weeks. I think that's when your bench comes in. For 2 weeks to go, I do think you can put all your funds into your starting 11 and just absolutely hammer it like that. So, a couple of tips on here. So, we've kind of touched on it already is be careful of World Cup players. So, a great example of this is Phil Foden. Everyone started getting him in, and he is someone that is destined to be on that plane to the World Cup, bar any unfortunate injuries. So there is a difference between players that are guaranteed to go to the World Cup and players that are trying to go to the World Cup. Pep Guardiola has kind of said in the past that those players that have got the World Cup in mind, he doesn't really want to play them because they're less focused, even subconsciously, they're less focused on the game they're playing and they're more focused on, ducking out of challenges because they don't want to get injured for the World Cup and they're trying to put, a bit of a more reserved performance in. So that's why I think Phil Foden hasn't been starting the last couple of games. Although the players like Wilson, Trippier, Rashford, maybe even Saka to an extent, or the players like Haaland that aren't going to the World Cup because the teams haven't qualified, they're the players that you want to get in. They're the players that you know are guaranteed to start. And target home teams. Home teams, they do have an advantage, especially with the crowd behind them. And I think they are the teams, especially if they've got two fixtures at home, they're more likely to keep a clean sheet, and they're also more likely to get attacking returns. So let me know what you think about the wildcard team and what we've said in terms of tips and avoiding World Cup players. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck if you are wildcarding. And yeah, please subscribe or like the video. That'd be greatly appreciated. And I will see you in the next one.